Perfect. All right. Okay, welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. My name is Sarah McAllister. I am the Senior Associate Director for Alumni Career at Professional Development. And Nina, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Nina Rafo. I'm the Assistant Director of Career and Professional Development for alumni at Tulane. And I will be all things tech today. So if you have any issues with just like anything, you can let me know and I'll direct message you in the chat.
Great. So as you can see, we are recording the session and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, which has over 70 recorded sessions from the past. And so if you're not familiar with that channel, we'd love for you to check it out. It has topics ranging from some similar to what we're going to talk about today, kind of a personal, professional experience and how that can translate to your own professional journey, as well as how to write a cover letter, LinkedIn, interview tips. So everything under the umbrella of career and professional development. Also, just to plug, if you're curious about what it looks like to be a speaker for this professional development series, please reach out to Nina or myself, and we'd love to have a conversation with you about what that looks like. Okay, so with that, I think I've covered all the housekeeping. I'm really excited for Ariel Campos today. Nina and I have had several conversations with her about her professional experience and just her really unique journey. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of you. So actually, Ariel, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself and however you want to do that, and then kick us off. Before that, sorry, I prompted you and then I'm going to take that back. We do want this to be a conversation. And so please feel free to put your questions in the chat. There'll be times throughout, and especially at the end, to engage with Ariel about any of your questions, but please feel free to use the chat as much as possible. Okay, take it away. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet all of you. Just before we begin, two things. The first thing is I am at a manufacturing plant right now, one of my company's manufacturing plants. We did a tour, so it might get a little loud. So hopefully that doesn't impede on anything. And then secondly, just before I begin, all of my opinions are my own. Just want to give that disclaimer. I guess it's the lawyer in me. But yeah, I'm so appreciative for all of you for being here and, being open to listening to my story. Hopefully it's of interest. And yeah, I guess a little bit about myself. My name's Ariel Campos. I graduated from Tulane Law School in 2021, and I currently live in Chicago, but I've also lived in New Orleans when I was in law school. I lived in Los Angeles for many years. I lived very briefly in Barcelona. So, I really have had a very random career and journey thus far. So yeah. One other thing is that if any of you have any questions or just any thoughts, like I want this to be a conversation. I'm very informal. So, any questions you have, feel free to throw them in the chat or just, raise your hand and I'm happy to talk through them. So I guess I'll start out with my background, just a general background. And after this, I will put my LinkedIn in the chat as well. So I guess origins wise, I grew up right outside of the suburbs of Chicago in a suburb called Naperville, Illinois. And I went to undergrad at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And while I was there, I first started out as a communications major, which was pretty cool. I was in the same class as Jimmy Butler, if any of you are basketball fans, so it's kind of cool. But then I decided to become a business major and I majored in business. And I kind of didn't really know what to do, career-wise. Even in undergrad, I knew business was a good area to go into. So, after undergrad was kind of ending, I was deciding what jobs, I wanted to pursue. And I ended up getting a job in IT consulting, which was very random. And so I worked for a company called Baker Tilly, headquartered in Chicago, and I was an IT consultant. And at first I had no idea what I was doing in terms of, IT in that world. And after I learned that, I was doing that for a bit and decided I wanted to move to Los Angeles. So within that, I kind of switched to work for, a bigger company in consulting. So I went to KPMG and I worked in Los Angeles and I was also doing IT consulting. And while I was there, this was kind of the first instance where, I had been on this linear path, kind of working in, consulting. I was doing well, I was comfortable, but at the same time, I felt like it wasn't really fitting me anymore, especially just the environment of working in the Big Four is very stressful, and I wanted to change. So I ended up just applying to a bunch of jobs, and I got a job at an investment management firm called Ariel Management, also in Los Angeles, and I worked in compliance. And I had no idea what compliance was when I first joined that company, but basically it was making sure the employees were following the company code of ethics and code of conduct, which is kind of similar to what I was doing when I was in IT consulting, because in that role, I was working, doing a lot of internal process evaluation and auditing, I guess you could say, like internal auditing. So compliance and audit were kind of similar in the sense that you're making sure everything is kind of, you know, in line, and you have to be very detail oriented. So I was doing that I was working in compliance at Aries for several years, and I was doing that for almost 4 years. And while I was there, I started to kind of, I guess, have these feelings where I felt that my job was great, you know, I was comfortable, but I felt like I was kind of stagnant. And I don't know if any of you have ever felt that way, but I definitely felt like, you know, I could be very comfortable in this position for many, many years, but I felt like I was missing something. I felt like I needed to learn more, and that I just wanted to do something different. Alongside that, I also felt like I was kind of feeling this innate urge to do something where I could help people. So I was very confused. And then I went out to dinner with some of my friends in LA, and one of my friends' husbands gave me some really good advice. He's like, well, if you're saying all this, why don't you just do something about it instead of just, you know, sitting here wallowing in your existential crisis. So I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, maybe I can go get a PhD and like teach, or I can do this or do that. And I had all these ideas. And then he basically was like, well, I don't know how it kind of got brought up, but he brought up the idea of becoming a lawyer. And I had never even thought of that. You know, I have no lawyers in my family. My family, you know, I was one of the first to go to college. My parents went to college, and then, you know, after that I did, but, you know, it's not like that was necessarily, I guess, the norm. And so I was kind of feeling a little confused. I was like, well, you know, I like the idea of becoming a lawyer, but I don't know any lawyers. You know, I had no idea what to do. But then once the idea was planted, I was like, okay, you know, I'm feeling complacent. I want to change. And I like Law and Order. I thought it could be interesting. So I started to kind of read about it. And like I said, I don't have anyone in my family who's a lawyer. At the time I had no friends who were lawyers. And so I was just really, I didn't know where to start. But after researching for a while, just, you know, Googling, looking at blogs, maybe even Reddit, you know, whatever I could find that could kind of tell me about the experience of being a lawyer, I was intrigued. And so I decided to study for the LSAT, and I told myself, okay, I'll study for this LSAT, even though I'm working full time. And if I meet a certain score, then I'll apply to law school. But if I don't, it is what it is, you know, I'll move on. Maybe I'll try something else. So this was kind of the beginning of, I guess, a large shift for me, because, and I guess this relates to, you know, career transitions, in the sense that I had this career, it was safe, I was in compliance, I was, you know, very comfortable. And I guess personally, just because of this innate urge and need that I felt to have some kind of a change, and, you know, once the seed had been planted to go to law school and become a lawyer, I just felt like I had to kind of pursue that. And I do think that, you know, some people transition careers because they're really unhappy. And sometimes I also think it can happen because, like, you feel complacent, like I said. So I guess there are many origins to why that happens. But I think the hardest part is actually, you know, taking steps to actually make a change. I think that's, as humans, it's so difficult. Even though change is inevitable, it's so difficult to actually put the mechanisms in place to do so. So during this time period, when I decided to go to law school and study for the LSAT, it was pretty hard. I mean, to be completely honest, I isolated myself a lot to study. And I also was just kind of like, what am I doing? You know, because it was such a big change. I was very scared. Interestingly, a kind of fun fact, when I was studying for the LSAT, I used to study at the Starbucks in Beverly Hills. And one day I was just studying, and I look up and Hugh Jackman was there. So it was kind of a cool celebrity sighting. I was like, okay, maybe this is inspiration, because I love X-Men. So that was kind of cool. But so yeah, so I studied for about 2 months, which is actually pretty short to study for the LSAT. But I was working full time, so it was really difficult to kind of find time. I would go to work every day, and then after work, I would go to a library close by, a public library. For some reason, I I study very well in public libraries. I don't know why, particularly, yeah, I don't know. So I would basically, had a little study schedule, and I do that basically every day for, and then on the weekends I would do practice tests for the LSAT. And yeah, I did that for 2 months, and then I took the LSAT, and I was really nervous. I had because I was so unfamiliar with anything legal, I had no idea like what was going to happen next if I did potentially get in. So that was very kind of scary for me because it was such unfamiliar territory. So after I took it, obviously I waited and I got the results, and I ended up getting the score. Actually, I was at the cutoff of the score that I wanted to apply to law school. So it's like, okay, you know what, this is a sign, I'm going to do it. So once that happened, it was very intimidating because now I know this, a lot of people who go to law school typically have parents or family friends who are lawyers. And that's just my experience. Maybe it's different. But I knew absolutely no one. My parents could not help me. No one in my family could help me. And I was like, where do I start? Like, not only, I think a lot of people, when you think about a career transition, you think a lot about, okay, I'm just gonna go to school and do this, but nobody talks about, okay, you have to apply to all these schools, you have to write cover letters, you have to pay for the applications, and you have to pay for miscellaneous fees, etc. Like, for example, for certain law schools, to apply to law school through the portal that you need to apply to, you have to pay, I think it's $30 to $50 for every application. And then on top of it, every law school has an application fee. So nobody kind of talks about those costs that are baked in, which, I mean, can add up. I think I spent over $500 applying to law schools, and I applied to 10. And the most expensive ones I didn't get into. So I'm still a little bitter about that, but that's life. And so that part was difficult in itself because I had no idea that that was something I would, have to budget for example. And then on top of it, it's very time consuming to write all of these different personal statements, and then you have to tailor them per law school, etc. And so I was working full time, and then after work every day, I go to the library once again, and I would just be typing out different personal statements, kind of trying to figure out where I wanted to apply, where I thought I would get in with my, credentials, etc. Crafting my resume for each law school, etc. So that took a while. And I think I took the LSAT. I think it was warm, and I took it in Illinois, and it was warm. So I think it was in May, maybe, I don't remember. And I applied, I believe, in November. So I applied kind of early, for anyone who's interested in applying for law school. And so following that, I, sent out my applications, and I applied to Tulane specifically, just to mention that, because I had lived on the West Coast for several years. I grew up in the Midwest. I, for some reason, had no interest in moving to the, I guess, East. I don't know. But I had never lived in the South. And I felt like, it's a different perspective. It's a different region of the country. So I thought it would be really cool to, apply to a school that I never would have typically thought of, because most of the schools I applied to were either in like the Midwest or in California. So I applied to Tulane kind of on a whim, actually. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, but I had heard of it, obviously. And once I toured, I was like, oh, this is such a cool school. I love New Orleans. I don't know how I feel about the humidity still, but I love New Orleans. And so after I finished all my applications, then I was just kind of tediously waiting to see where I got in. And then once, the applications kind of rolled in, or sorry, acceptances or rejections kind of rolled in, then I kind of had to navigate, okay, now this is becoming real. I took the LSAT, I've applied, I spent all this money and time, I'm working full time, my work does not know that this is happening. Now, am I actually going to commit to this? And am I actually going to quit my job that, is very stable and go to law school? And I think that was kind of an additional, I guess, reckoning that I had to go through, as part of transitioning from working in, the audit compliance space to actually, kind of early mid-career, taking myself out and being like, okay, I'm foregoing the opportunity cost of, years of work, 3 years of work. I'm gonna have to pay for the bar. I'm gonna have to take out loans, and those are all factors I kind of had to think about. And to be completely frank or transparent, I guess, because I don't really have family who, are lawyers or anything like that, I didn't really understand the impact of that until I was in law school. And so that was something that, and I do mentorships, and I do think that's something I always tell my mentees is that you really have to think about, the cost of all of this, not just the actual financial cost, but the opportunity cost, the debt, et cetera, because I mean, I had no one there to kind of guide me in that aspect. And that was something that I wish I had been more aware of before I went into it. I still would have done it, but I wish I had been a little more prepared, Um, so, so yeah, and sorry, I'll pause for a second. Does anyone have any questions? I feel like I talk very quickly. If none, I'll keep going.
I have a quick one, but maybe you can
Sure.
come back to it at the end. I would love for you, because I actually want to like have you continue the timeline. Something that's I'd love for you to go a little bit more in depth on is especially those first couple jobs that you had. Like, how did you
Mhm.
make the decisions to change roles?
Before law school?
Yeah, but that can be kind of yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I can go into that really quickly. So I mean, my first two jobs after undergrad were both in like the consulting, I guess, IT consulting / internal audit space. And when I say, oh, thank you, Catherine. When I say internal audit, that basically is not an external facing audit. So we're basically helping, the companies I work for would come in and help with preparing for an external audit, like KPMG, for example. So it was a really cool arena to be in. There was a lot of travel, a lot of well, people aren't the biggest fans of auditors, but for me it was fun. I guess I don't know how people feel about lawyers either, but I picked such exciting careers. But yeah, so I'd come in, do that. And when I transitioned from my first job to my second job, like I said, I worked in the Big Four, KPMG being one of the Big Four accounting firms. Um, if anyone's unfamiliar with that. And that is a very demanding environment. And I did it for a while, but I kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, if I'm going to be working in this environment, I felt like I didn't feel a passion for the work. And I was just feeling really overwhelmed and burnt out, to be honest. So that's when I started applying. And the job I ended up getting, which was in compliance, I think I was well suited for, which I didn't even realize because I was kind of confused because compliance is a very ambiguous field. And I didn't realize how well suited I was for it because audit and compliance typically are, they coexist very well. And so I, decided to switch to that job because it was a different opportunity. It was something I had, never heard of before. And I was like, okay, I'm unhappy where I'm at. I don't want to keep doing this. I don't mind being an auditor, but I feel like if I'm not passionate and this job requires this level of commitment and like lack of work-life balance, I'd rather be doing something I'm more interested in. And why not try something new? So when I went into compliance, I was, just trying to learn as much as I could, and I ended up really liking it. And so, yeah, that was kind of the impetus why I went from one to the other. I think the second one, or going to compliance from audit, was just kind of fate. It wasn't necessarily being like, oh my gosh, I really want to do compliance. It was more so just, I kind of stumbled upon it and got lucky. So yeah, so essentially, but thanks for asking the question, Sarah. So yeah, essentially when I was kind of at the precipice of deciding, what do I want to do next in terms of what school I want to go to, because I had gotten into several law schools, what area do I want to, go to? I didn't even realize, that's another thing. I didn't realize the financial impact. And the second thing is I did not realize that location of where you go to law school really, really matters. I thought it would be, a factor, but I did not think it would be as big of a factor as it was. Some examples, when you go to law school in California, typically everyone who goes to law school in California feeds into working and, practicing in California. And it sets itself up very well because your network will just be there and it's very easy to get a job once you graduate. At Tulane, for example, I would say that most people from my law school, I might be wrong about this, but most people went to practice in New York, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana. So I wanted to go to California after law school, and I did not realize, okay, I don't have a network in California. I didn't realize how hard it would be to break into that. That's another kind of factor I had to think about when I decided to go to law school. And I think that could apply to a lot of grad school situations as well. Maybe for like the top 10 grad schools, it doesn't really matter where you go because they're like, the top 10 or whatever. But I think just in general with law school, that's for MBA, I'm sorry. But for law school specifically, I do think where you go is another factor. I didn't even I wish I had had a mentor to help me have like made all of these decisions because I did it on my own. It was just me, Google, pondering, going on hikes and trying to think about what to do. And so it was a very difficult decision to choose to go to Tulane. And so I was between, I think, oh my gosh, I was between three law schools in California, one in Chicago, and then I was waitlisted at one of my top ones, and then I had Tulane. And when it kind of got down to the wire, when I had to decide, I was like, okay, I looked at, I kind of tried to look at, okay, like if I'm going to have to take out loans, for example, what is the lowest cost of living out of all of these? And then also like what programs are really good. And Tulane had a really good international program. And I was really interested in studying abroad in law school because I hadn't had the opportunity to go do that when I was an undergrad. And so, when I visited Tulane, I fell in love and I was like, okay, I'm going to commit to Tulane. And it was a, really scary experience because once I did that and I made that commitment, then I had to quit my job. I knew I was going to move from the city I'd been living in for several years. I had my friends, etc. But I was like, okay, I've been feeling this stagnancy. And, to be honest, like if I stay here, I live in, a great city. LA is beautiful. It's warm. Definitely missing that right now. I'm in Chicago, so, it's a bit cold. But at the same time, if I stay, this is going to keep happening. If I don't address and make a change in terms of pursuing a career, I don't even know what it's going to entail, but pursuing a career that's more making me feel like I'm able to maybe make a difference in some way. Or just, I don't know, just kind of fulfilling this need to learn. If I don't do this now, when am I going to do it, And I had gotten in, I had kind of done everything I needed to do to get myself to that point. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I quit my job. And then I ended my lease, got a subleaser, and I started to get ready to move to New Orleans. And so that was kind of the backstory as to how I, started law school. I'm sorry if that was very long-winded. I tried to be as high level as possible. But yeah, so in 2018, I moved to New Orleans to begin at Tulane. And that was interesting in itself because, like I said, with career transitions, I think you don't really understand what you're getting yourself into until you're in the moment. I think that's just life in general, I suppose. Hopefully some of this, maybe if anyone's thinking about one, provides some kind of context to like all the factors that go into it. But the biggest, when I went to Tulane, it was a really big culture shock for me. And that was kind of another hurdle I had to get through. And I think I was getting through it all of law school, to be honest. I think one thing that was really difficult for me to navigate, and I think this applies a lot to people who are the first in their family to go into like, higher education, like getting an MBA or like, some kind of master's or any type of graduate school. I had no idea, like, I didn't realize how many people, like I said, had family who were lawyers and they had like lingo that they knew. It was just so different from anything I had experienced that I felt very out of place. And I started to really develop, I would say, a lot of imposter syndrome my first year, because it was just so difficult to feel like I fit in, and I think in that situation, in order to kind of help equilibrize, I don't know if that's a word, but make myself feel more comfortable, I joined originally it was called La Alianza, but it was the Latinx Law Student Association at Tulane. And then, my second year I became president and I made some really good friends. Two of my, closest friends I met through there, and having that community that really helped me because I was really feeling kind of alone and confused and overwhelmed. And just having other people who, potentially were the first in their family as well to go to law school. And, just other people who shared the same culture as me was really great to have for support. And that really helped me kind of get through my first 2 years of law school, I would say. I think the academic part was also difficult, but at the same time, I do think that one thing that I did that really helped me kind of get better as law school went on was understanding my learning style. And that I think I had never done that before. Like even in undergrad, I had always tried to study like how everyone else studies. And in law school, I quickly realized that I'm a very sporadic person. I need to take breaks. So, I would study and then I would go on a walk or go on a run or do something. And I didn't really accept that about myself until law school, like middle of law school. And I was like, okay, I need to like get it together. And that really helped me improve my performance in law school. So yeah, I would say in terms of navigating just graduate school in general, for anyone thinking about a career transition, I would say two things that really help were finding a community and then also accepting and understanding your learning style. So my first year, or sorry, my first summer in law school, I interned at a Latino civil rights firm. It was called MALDEF, Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And it was amazing. I really enjoyed that. And I knew that when I went into law school, I was like, okay, no matter what I do with my career in law, I want to be able to give back and help others. And, I'm very passionate about like immigration, for example. I wanted to make sure that I was able to just, have the tools to give back in many ways. So that internship was really instrumental in kind of preparing me just for knowledge of civil rights, immigration law, et cetera. And so after that summer, I didn't really know what to do. The next summer, like it's called 2L, but your second year of law school summer is really big because typically, it's important in order to whatever, if you want to go to a firm, like typically you want to intern at the firm you want to go to that year. And I had no idea. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And so it was actually really interesting in terms of just leveraging my prior life before law school, because I was like, okay, I'm going to try just applying everywhere and see like what sticks in terms of, my second year summer's job, or internship, I'm sorry. So I applied for this in-house job. And for those who don't know, being an in-house lawyer means that you are an attorney within a company. So you're not at a firm or anything like that. You're in the legal department of a company and you're basically, the company is your client. And I had kind of understood what in-house meant, but, I applied to companies, I applied everywhere that summer, and I ended up getting an interview at it's like a FinTech startup. And it was funny because somehow I think my background in business and audit was really appealing. And I think that really helped me kind of get that internship and then also be able to work well in that internship, because a lot of the other law students, maybe didn't have a business background and hadn't worked before law school. And so it was really nice because I was kind of able to understand that they had that need for someone with a business background. And I was able to kind of market myself and fulfill that and get that internship. And ironically, that this all happened during COVID. And so I ended up, doing that internship, and I really liked working in-house. I felt like it kind of, because throughout law school, I had felt kind of like lost and, I was trying to find my way, et cetera. And during that internship, I realized, okay, I have this business background. How do you apply that to, my now newfound legal career? And I realized I could find kind of something that worked, that kind of combined both. And so I was like, okay, that was when I kind of knew in terms of direction after law school, I want to stay in-house. I want to work for a company. And I also had my background, kind of working like, in civil rights, et cetera, the summer before. So I was like, okay, I can still volunteer. I can still, fulfill my needs to help people alongside like my career, So that was really great. I kind of found myself that year. In addition, I was able to study abroad in Barcelona, and that was amazing. I don't know how it was able to happen with COVID. There's a lot of issues with visas, et cetera. But for anyone who's considering a career transition, who's going to grad school, if you weren't able to study abroad in undergrad, I do think that going to study abroad during grad school is an amazing experience. I mean, obviously it's like costly and all of that. But at the same time, I do think that it was something that, was probably one of the most valuable experiences of my life thus far. So that was an opportunity that I was able to give myself, that I hadn't been able to get when I was younger. So after that, my final year of law school came up, and I was studying at my parents' because of COVID, et cetera. So, everything was kind of in the air in terms of going into class, et cetera. So I was kind of deciding, what do I want to do after law school? I knew that I wanted to go in-house. And so I was trying to apply and kind of figure out how to get into a company and, work there. And in that instance, I decided to once again leverage my past life before law school. And I actually ended up connecting with my former manager at the company I worked for prior to law school, which is an investment management company where I worked in compliance. And they actually had a position that was available in compliance, kind of elevated above what I did, that was more crafted for a lawyer. And so I ended up accepting that. And then after law school, I moved to LA, and then I started working in that capacity. So it was kind of cool because, you know, it was kind of ironic in some ways because I went back to where I was before law school, but in a different role. But it's kind of funny how life, you know, I had this period of stagnancy, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm so scared to like leave this job and all of that. And, you know, then I pursued getting a higher education, which I do not regret in any way because I think education is priceless. And, you know, obviously that was very stressful and daunting and an experience in itself. But then it's funny that I ended up back at where I was before law school, and I had been so scared to leave. So it kind of shows that sometimes we kind of, you know, can blow up these fears in our head of like, oh my gosh, my life will be over. Like I'll never get this opportunity again if I do X, Y, and Z. And then, I mean, it kind of taught me that lesson, like, okay, sometimes, you know, it will work itself out. So then I was working there for a bit, and I was working more so in a compliance role. And I was like, okay, and then I passed the bar. That was another thing. And so once I found out that I passed the California bar, I was like, okay, I need to get a job actually practicing fully as a lawyer. So I ended up really having to figure out, as I had said before, I did not have family that were lawyers or like a network of lawyers that I knew. And a lot of people who graduate from law school, they do like, you know, maybe they've interned at a firm or they just have more connections. And I didn't really have a lot of connections. And so I'm here, I'm not even like, I think I was less than 1 year out of law school, 9 months out of law school. I'm newly licensed to practice law. And I was like, okay, how do I get a job in-house? And going in-house straight out of law school is very difficult. Typically people work at a firm for many years, but I was like, I'm going to do it. So what I decided to do was something that I was very scared to do, but it ended up paying off. And what I did was I kind of threw myself into professional organizations in order to network. And I'm an extrovert, but I can be very shy sometimes, occasionally. And so it was very scary because I basically I joined these networks, and then I would find people in the networks that had careers that were interesting to me. And I would find them on LinkedIn, or I'd find them on like a law firm webpage, and I would just contact them. And, you know, I would say, hey, you know, your job's really interesting to me. I'm also a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association, for example. Can we talk sometime? I'd love to talk. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, everyone was super friendly, super willing to speak with me. And I learned a ton, made some great connections. And I believe through that, it kind of not only made me kind of more confident, but I also think it really helped me because now I have mentors through those conversations that I made with people or connections I made with people. And then in addition, that kind of network gets you an interview. You know, if you're on the bottom of a list of resumes for a big company and you know someone, you know, and they're your friend or your mentor, you know, that will help you, you know. So for the first time, I really leveraged networking because I was like, I really want to work in-house and I want to make this happen. And I was able to get a job at a crypto startup, actually. So I did that in LA for, you know, a little for a year. And that was really interesting because, you know, not only was I like a newer lawyer, but I also, it was my first time really practicing, but also it was crypto. So I didn't really know, like, you know, I had to kind of navigate the crypto world and understand that because I feel like it's this, you know, kind of phantom world that you kind of have to learn about once you're in it. I don't know if any of you are crypto investors. But yeah, so I did that. And then I now am working in Chicago, actually, at a large manufacturing company. And that was also interesting. You know, I shifted from crypto, which is kind of intangible, to manufacturing, which is very tangible. I mean, I'm at a plant right now and I can definitely see everything being made. And it was interesting because I think I kind of, you know, I'm very happy I'm in the position I'm in now because of the fact that I really wanted to learn, you know, something different. And I really liked the manufacturing field. And so I was able to kind of, you know, after my last job, I was able to take some time and kind of decide, you know, what do I think that I made a big career transition going from, you know, working and having that life and then going to law school. But then I do think that even once you get what you want, so I wanted to go to law school, I wanted to become a lawyer, and I was able to do that. I'm very like privileged and glad that I was able to do that. But then I do think, and I don't know if any of you feel this way as well, but I think that even after that, there's a lot of, you still have to kind of constantly reevaluate and say, okay, am I happy here? Or is this, fulfilling my needs, et cetera, and kind of decide, you kind of have to recalibrate plans and decide what steps you want to take next. And then you kind of have to come up with a game plan. So for example, for this job now, I wasn't sure after my last job, because it was a smaller crypto company. I was like, okay, I know that after this job, I want to, after when I was thinking about what to do next, I was like, okay, I know that I want to work at a large company. I want something different than a small company. I want to work with something tangible. And so manufacturing is definitely a tangible arena. I wanted to work at a global company, and I wanted to be in Chicago, which is where my family is. So all of those things kind of factored into my decision. And once I kind of had those blinders on, like I don't have any other real strict, I guess, criteria aside from those, it really helped me narrow down the type of jobs I was applying for. And then kind of, get into the role I'm in now. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I'm at today. Does anyone have any questions? I have more, but I just thought I'd pause because I talk a lot.
You're doing great. This is great. I'll jump on if anybody else has questions, throw them in the chat. I want to come back to kind of one of the themes that I'm hearing throughout your story is the
Sure.
fear, right? Which is such a real, normal thing that all of us have. Because I think a lot of people get paralyzed by that fear and then don't make the next decision.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you move through those feelings to then continue to kind of pursue what you wanted to do next?
I would say, I use a multitude of things because even now, I still think that I can get imposter syndrome. I can be afraid. I think it was a combination of trying really hard to find mentors and have people who, and for me specifically, I really sought out Latino mentors, people that look like me and are similar to me culturally in that aspect, because Latinos are only 2% of attorneys in the US. So it's a very small population. So I did join like the Latino Lawyers Bar Association, for example. That's been amazing. And I met one of my really good friends. She also joined it with me. And so, I think that having that in my life helped with fear. This was, I guess, post-law school, but pre-law school, I do think that I really looked up to Sonia Sotomayor when I was pre-law school, and I actually got to meet her when I was in law school at Tulane at the Presidential Speaker Series, which was amazing. She's very sweet. But I think kind of having role models that I could relate to in some form. In addition, I really got into journaling. That really helped me. I became a runner, which I hated running before, even though I was in track in high school. So I don't know. But that also really helped me. Therapy also, really helped me, if I'm being completely frank, kind of get over those fears, because, if you want to make a change, sometimes you're the only one holding yourself back. And so to me, I had to not only think about like professionally how I can get over that fear, but also just as a human being, because fear is inevitable, but it's kind of about learning how we can cope with the fear ourselves through our own techniques, et cetera. And kind of befriend ourselves and say like, okay, you're going through this time where you're feeling a lot of anxiety or fear. What can you do? What tools do you have in your toolbox to kind of address that, So that's how I would say I kind of coped, and I'm still coping with it. It definitely, does not go away. I think it's gonna be a permanent thing, just as part of human nature. I also got a dog, and that really helped. So he's definitely like my little buddy. I do see a question in the chat. Let me see if I'm missing any. Okay. So I know Michael asked a question: how do you work through the concerns about transitioning from a steady income to taking a chance in another career path, especially if graduate school is part of that? So that's a really good question. That was really scary. I was very scared about that. I think that once I decided I was going to go to law school, just to keep in mind for context, I decided almost a year before I went. So in that year, I was like, I'm going to save as much money as I can. So, no more Uber Eats for a year, and I was really trying to just, as I said in the beginning, I kind of isolated myself in that period. So I wasn't really doing anything. I was just studying, deciding what to do, looking up like law school, etc. Oh, thank you, Chrissy. And so I kind of did that. So I had, felt like I had support from myself, I guess, as I was about to go into law school. I also kind of rationalized, loans and all of that and what that would mean. As I said also previously, I think I was kind of not very educated financially in terms of like what the cost of graduate school is. And I'm not educated financially, I'm sorry. I just I didn't realize the impact of what that would be until I was in it, which I think, that can happen with anything, I suppose. But I tried my best to kind of like pick a law school with a low cost of living, good return, etc. To kind of minimize cost, because I knew that I would take a hit financially by going to law school and leaving my career. And I also, just really hope that I would get a good job after law school, because it is very, I think graduate school can be very, it's very expensive. It's not only the school, but there's just all these fees, and then all the professional exams you have to do, like the GMAT's expensive, the MCAT, LSAT, and then in law school you have to take a like a professional responsibility exam called MPRE, and that's expensive. And then you have to take the bar, and you have to pay, it can be like $5,000 for the bar prep course. It's insane. So that's another cost you have to kind of factor in. And then like once you're barred, you also have to pay for your license every year. It's like $500, I believe. So it's just a lot to think about, and so obviously I was really intimidated by that and leaving my income, but at the same time, it kind of in a way motivated me while I was in law school I was like, I need to get a job. Like there's no fallback option, So luckily I think the fire that was lit under me helped me a lot, and like really helped me kind of break out of my shell and like network, etc. But it definitely was a really big fear, but I did feel like if I had stayed in the role I was in, nothing against the role or anything like that or any of my past experiences, but I just felt like me as a person, I needed something more. And I think that was like more education and to make a change, and being a lawyer was really important to me because I wanted to have tools in my toolbox as like a person to be able to help others, like if, for volunteer opportunities, etc. And I felt like prior to that, I felt kind of, I don't know, confused and like I said, stagnant. And I think that even now, just being a lawyer, like I know that I can, volunteer if I see some kind of cause that I, want to get involved in, and I can actually tangibly volunteer. And just, it was really important to me to be able to have that just professionally and personally. And I felt like if I didn't do that, I would regret that, So to me, the regret was too scary. That was more scary to me to face than the change. And it took it took years. It took a while, I think, to get to that point. But yeah, that's kind of, I guess, my explanation.
Great. So I got a direct message for a question. So
Sure.
the question is about networking. This person says, reaching out to people I don't know terrifies me. Can you please offer more details about your networking efforts and experience? Did you talk with people over the phone, email, or face-to-face?
Yeah, sure. So it's a good question. I was terrified. Even now going to networking events, when I first walk in, I'm like, oh my gosh. I usually like try to go with a friend. But if you can't, sometimes it can be very daunting. I would say for me, the major thing was I think I was also at a point though where I was like, I need to practice law. When I started really throwing myself into networking, it was when I was trying to go in-house from working in compliance once again. And so I was like, I'm barred, I need to do this. I was very like driven to be able to actually use my law degree, not law degree, law license, I'm sorry, as a practicing attorney. And I felt like I had to try something different in order to do that. Nothing against anything, but I would say I would mainly like find, let's say that I am a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association. They send out newsletters. They'll send like 40 top lawyers under 40, and it will have everyone's kind of like job description. And I would see people who had a really interesting job description, something that really struck my eye. I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to do that, you know, when I'm more experienced, or that just sounds awesome. And so I looked them up, and if I could find them on LinkedIn, I would add them, and then I would send them a message and say like, hey, like, you know, I saw your thing on the HNBA 40 under 40. I was wondering if you could talk sometime. I'm really interested in your experience. And I was, you know, I was genuinely interested. And so then we'd usually just talk on the phone or do a Zoom call. And you know, the first few times it was really scary, but I think I started getting used to it. And it was actually really cool because you hear everyone else's stories and they're just, I was like, oh, there's stories similar to mine. And I realized I'm not alone. There are other people who, men and women, it doesn't matter. Like everyone goes through different, you know, I guess ups and downs and experiences on their journey. And so that was really great. And I think it ended up giving me so much more than it took in terms of like fear in the beginning. But it like I said, it just took a few times of doing like the networking calls to kind of acclimate to that. I would also like if it was a law partner, like a partner at a law firm who was listed and I found their career really interesting, typically on law firm websites, if interested, they'll have like a V card and they will just give their phone number or their email. And so I would just email them through that. And a lot of like bigger consulting firms have that too. So, you know, I obviously just kind of reached out. Yeah, I would say via email. And then typically I'd do like a phone or Zoom. And that's how I would kind of just get to know different people. And then I would kind of keep like a list of everyone that I knew and, you know, their contact information. And I would, you know, like some people I, you know, still touch base with, or if I need like, if I'm going through some kind of like, you know, need advice in any way, I know that I have like a network there. So yeah, that's how I would say I approached it. Email and then setting up a phone or Zoom. I didn't do it in person, so, but it was also kind of during the COVID, like post, I guess, kind of post-COVID era. So Zoom was kind of the norm. I don't know if there's another question. Let me see. The boot. I actually have never been to the boot. It's kind of funny. But yeah, that's basically, I don't know if hopefully that all made sense. I feel like it was a lot. But yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I mean, based on everyone's comments in the chat, like, and including my own experience, like this was really helpful to have you kind of walk us through your experience and the different strategies and techniques that you used. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. I think in our last few minutes, if there aren't any other questions, I'd love for you to just kind of wrap it up for us, like final thoughts, final advice for anyone who's in a similar situation as you are.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you all so much for your comments and, you know, just your questions, etc. I tried to be as transparent as possible just because I do think that, you know, I think like, I guess this is final advice, I guess. But I think it's important that as humans, we just kind of are vulnerable, you know, because I do think we all kind of go through similar things. And, you know, obviously it's important sometimes to know like we're not alone in going through certain things. So yeah, I think like, you know, I think also it's really important to network because I do think a lot of people went through similar things as you and are more than happy to lift you up in any type of situation. And I realized that a lot when I started networking, that there were so many people out there once we kind of like, you know, talked to each other and really got to know each other, they were more than willing to kind of like give advice or just, you know, have a listening ear, etc. And that has really helped me professionally just because I realized, you know, like I have mentors and a network out there that will be there for me and vice versa, of course. So yeah, and I think another thing that is really important to me at least is like mentorships. Like I've been trying to sign up to be a mentor like through the HMBA, etc. Just because I think that giving back in that form is also very helpful. And in a way it teaches you because you're having to teach others, which I think it's just a reciprocal relationship and it's really beautiful. So yeah, I think that we're just, you know, I think we're capable of a lot of resiliency and evolution. And I think whatever career transition, if interested, that you're going through, you'll be okay on the other end. It's just sometimes the journey is a little more complicated than you expect, but it all will be okay. So yeah.
And if people want to network with you or have questions that they think of after, what's the best way that they can connect with you?
On LinkedIn, I would say, let me type in my LinkedIn right here. Okay, there. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah,
And
of
I
course.
know we're going to get a lot of great feedback. So thanks everyone.
Thanks. Yeah,
All
of
right,
course. And thank
enjoy
you
your
all for
day.
listening. Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.